Welcome to Evolve Now. I'm Kristen Hartnagel, and this show is about the moments that wake us up, the books we read, the experiences we live, and the inner shifts that change the way we see ourselves and the world. If you're drawn to conscious living, imagination, and choosing joy on purpose, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to have this guest with me today. This is Dr. Peggy DeLong, and man, I've known her for a little over a year, but she's so impressed me that I wanted to have her on the show because she really speaks my language when she focuses on gratitude. So let me just do a formal introduction and tell you a little bit about Dr. Peggy. Dr. Peggy DeLong is known as the gratitude psychologist, and she's an international speaker, a 3 times author, and midlife awakening coach. She has over 3 decades of experience helping individuals and organizations cultivate joy, connection, and purpose. She's the founder of the Midlife Awakening Sisterhood, which is a transformative program supporting high-achieving midlife women with one-on-one coaching in groups, retreats, and healing experiences rooted in gratitude, positive psychology, and mental health expertise. Oh my gosh, that is so impressive. The work you do sounds so fun. So first, let me just welcome you to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Kristen.
Thank you for being willing to be with us today. So what I'm super excited about is that as a gratitude expert, you're reshaping the way people are thinking. So how did you get involved in that in the first place?
Well, it really came out of crisis and unintentionally. I was an ungrateful teen. I was an ungrateful young adult. It took tragedy in my life to discover the power of gratitude for myself. And that was during my fiance's cancer treatment when I was 26 years old. And there came a point where the doctors said that there was nothing left that they could do for him and that he was going to die. And it was in those last days of his life that I discovered the power of gratitude through a cup of hazelnut coffee. When everything else was so incredibly unpredictable, I found gratitude in the predictability of that cup. Because they told me that he was going to die, but I didn't know when. Some days he could open his eyes and look at me. Other days he couldn't. Some days he couldn't speak my name. Each day I didn't know what was going to happen, including whether or not he was going to die that day. So I found, my 26-year-old self had no idea that what I was doing was practicing gratitude, but I hung on to that simple cup of coffee that brought me so much comfort through its predictability. I would wrap my hands around the cup and the warmth brought me comfort. The aroma of the hazelnut coffee is very strong, so that smell would permeate his hospital room and made it seem less sterile. And it just reminded me of being home. And that is what got me through, that the predictability of that cup that I would get every single day and just sit and journal next to him when other visitors weren't there. And it kept me company and it brought me comfort. And I didn't understand what I was doing at the time, but in hindsight now I know that it was the simple practice of gratitude and it was life-changing and now has really become my life's work to help other people harness the power of gratitude.
And it does change lives. So you were able to find some peace in that cup of coffee. But tell me some stories from the women that you've worked with about how gratitude has actually changed the trajectory of what somebody is experiencing. And before you do that, I wanted to say that part of the focus of our conversation today is going to revolve around a book. And we chose the book, The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And so I can't wait to dig into that. But I just wanted to get a sense of how gratitude can actually shape what people experience.
Certainly, one that resonates with me is a client who had lost her brother. He recently died, and she was experiencing so much grief, and the grief was causing physical problems. And she found herself driving to work in having so much stomach pain. And she participated in very I have several different programs related to gratitude. One is called a 30-day gratitude transformation, where I teach each day one simple way to implement gratitude into your life. And she participated in that 30-day program and just applied one of the methods. And during the middle of her drive, she said all of a sudden the world seemed brighter. When she got to work, she noticed the stomach pain went away. And it was simply through gratitude that it eased her nervous system, lessened the tense that was going on in her digestive system, and she reported feeling better. So that's one simple story. There are hundreds more, and I love that it's also backed by science. So these personal anecdotes are extremely powerful, but I love knowing why it works, the mechanisms, so that we know it's not luck, it's not just some fluffy thing out there, that it's rooted in science, and particularly the neurochemistry when we think about what we're grateful for and how that elevates mood. And then over the course of time, we can see through functional MRIs that we truly are forming new neural pathways in our brains to be more positive thinkers.
So you are really teaching people alchemy. You're teaching people how to be their own alchemist and transform the damaging things that they're holding in their thoughts that are actually literally causing harm to their bodies and transmuting that into something else. So do you want to talk about the science a little bit?
Sure. So when we think about what we are grateful for, we get a dose of serotonin and dopamine in our brains. Dopamine is related to elevating mood, and that makes us feel better instantaneously. And serotonin is a neurotransmitter that provides us with that feeling of enough. After we've had a great meal, had a wonderful conversation with a friend, seen a great movie, that's serotonin. And both of those are released and help us to feel better. So that is what works on the short-term basis. But when we do it on a long-term basis, and it doesn't need to take long each day, but long over the course of time, that is when the new neural pathways develop. And we can see through functional MRIs that the electrical jump from synapse to synapse gets closer and closer until it's actually touching and forms a neural pathway, a new thought. And it doesn't change the world, but it changes the way that we see the world. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Oh my gosh, I love that. The three things that you just said right there changes the way we see the world, and that changes the world. I missed one. You know what? There's a visual for this. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, but it's years old now, but it's all about quantum physics, and it actually has a cartoon and shows what it looks like to have those synapses firing thoughts across the bridge, and that when you have this well-worn neural pathway of something that doesn't serve you, it's like a superhighway. And when you intentionally replace it with something like gratitude, that kind of shrivels up. So there's neuroplasticity. You really can retrain your brain. And that's what your work is all about. How exciting is that?
It's really incredible and provides so much hope for people who believe that they can't change, that we truly can change at any time. And I love a particular study by Shawn Achor that took a look at men in their 70s who had considered themselves lifelong pessimists. And they did not believe that a gratitude practice could change the way they saw the world. And it absolutely did. After using a gratitude journal, they were able to rate themselves low-level pessimists. So really incredible study.
Never too late. Never too late to change your mind. And when you change your mind, everything else changes. So the vision that I have for the Evolve Now show is to help people understand that when we get excited about something that inspires us, like a book or a movie, or you heard a thought leader that you love say something that really resonated, that we tend to experience that in isolation. I mean, unless we join a book club. But I really believe that there are things that inspire me that when they do, I would love nothing more than to just run around the planet and give every single person that book and see if it would mean the same to them as it did to me. And so I wanted to bring people together to talk about certain things that inspired them and what it has done to kind of change the way your life is unfolding, the trajectory of how you're seeing things and doing things. So we talked about forming a little bit of this conversation around the 4 agreements, and it turns out that you actually recommend this book to people. So tell me what inspired you the most about the 4 agreements.
Well, I read it for the first time around 1995. It was recommended by my own therapist back then and during my time of grief. And it completely changed the way that it was looking at my experience and the way other people were responding to my grief. And all of the, particularly the chapters, Don't Take Anything Personally and Don't Make Assumptions, that those were adding to my grief by making assumptions and taking things personally all of the time. And once I started those practices, I knew that I felt better to work on those. And I always say that it's not a one and done deal. It's something that I still do every single day. I'm human, my feelings get hurt, but I become much more aware of when I am making an assumption and then taking something personally so that I'm able to release it and not take it on as my own when it's somebody else's issue that they need to work through.
That's kind of the same initial impetus for me when I read that book, is that be impeccable with your word, but don't take anything personally. So the 4 agreements are: be impeccable with your word, use language to create, not wound. Don't take anything personally, release the illusion that everything is about you. Boy, like we all think the world revolves around us. Number 3 is don't make assumptions. Ask, clarify, and stay curious. And always do your best, knowing that your best changes moment to moment. And so it is such a powerful book. And so when you think about how you're helping your clients through this, what are some of the things you're asking them to do and how do they respond?
I'm asking them to notice when they are making assumptions. So during my sessions, I can see it so easily, and I help to point that out to them. And just like with me, there's initially so much resistance. We want to hold on to those assumptions, those beliefs, even when they are harmful, even when they don't serve us, even when they don't fit. And that is part of the way that our brain works, confirmation bias. When we hold a belief to be true, we look for evidence in the world to prove it to be true, even when it's not true and even when it's something that is really harming us that we would love to release. So I also teach people about confirmation bias and why it's so difficult for us to release these assumptions that we have. So when I can point them out in sessions, it begins to open up their eyes to see the difference between truth and an assumption. And I also love the book Loving What Is by Byron Katie, and how she has a 4-step process that she calls the work to help people recognize when they're making an assumption and then to release that assumption. With the first question being, is this true? You have a thought and you ask yourself, is this true? And most of the time, due to confirmation bias, we say, yes, we want to hold on to that belief. It is true. Though the next question, is it 100% true? Is there any other possibility that this belief I have could not be true? And the answer is yes, there is another possibility. So it just opens up the idea that there could be something else going on, and most of the time there is, that it's not about us, but we are taking something that's happening in the world, making an assumption about it, and then making that assumption personal. So it makes us feel bad about ourselves. And it also harms relationships. So I also help people highlight how the assumptions that they are making affect how they behave in certain ways, and then that behavior is harming the relationship, not when they really want the relationship to improve.
Yeah. It's like we set ourselves up for disappointment when we are attached to a specific outcome. If we are attached to something looking a certain way and it doesn't go that way, we take that personally. And so just the work that you're doing to help people see those assumptions or counting on it looking a certain way, that attachment to that expectation does not serve you. It doesn't allow life to unfold as life is always unfolding. And I think that this book does a great job of helping us see that that's us. That's really on us to think that how narrow-minded we've been when what we could be doing is just like, show me a different way. It reminds me a little bit of the work I do with A Course in Miracles, where it's like, I can't experience anything without my Christenness. And I know that there's a lot of baggage with that, right? So I would rather see in wholeness, and I can't, because I can't she comes with me everywhere I go, right? So I like to do some surrendering work where it's more like, show me from a healed perspective how to see this differently, because there is another way. So, like you said, how do we help people open up that there are other possibilities? So, possibility thinking is really important. That to me is tapping into imagination. I was just working with somebody who is anticipating the holidays. This is Christmas Eve, by the way. So, wow, that you're making time for this conversation on Christmas Eve is such a gift. But she was anticipating it being a very hard experience. And so I just helped her see that you're kind of projecting that when it hasn't even happened yet. What if we changed your mind about it? What if we just got into imagination and imagined like it unfolding in a beautiful and unexpected way, because she was expecting it to be like it had been in the past. So, like, tell me something else about the book or what it did to your life personally, just anything that was inspired by this work.
So, particularly when I was going through my grief is very scary. It's scary for the person going through it. It can be incredibly lonely, but also for the people that loved me. And everybody has their different capacity in being able to be there for somebody grieving. So a huge task for me during that time was to not take it personally when people who I may have expected to be there for me in certain ways were not capable of doing so. And it didn't mean they cared about me or loved me any less. It was just about how they were handling grief and their capacity to handle it in certain ways. So that was instrumental for me in what I believe to be saving some of my friendships during that time.
Yeah. Yeah. People don't really know, because everybody experiences grief in a unique way, like as unique as a fingerprint. People want a way to handle how to help somebody who's going through grief. And that's as unique as a fingerprint as well. I lost my mom, my dad, and my sister, only one left in my nuclear family. And it was interesting to observe how people just don't know what you need. And so, wouldn't it be a great thing for each of us to just be able to voice what it is we need a little more clearly? Like, what I need right now is space. What I need right now is just to be held and rock like a baby because I want to bawl my eyes out, or I just want to do that on my own. Like, we just don't know how to do that. And the people who are witnessing somebody going through grief doesn't know how to, typically people don't know how to just say, what do you need? How can I help?
Right.
What do you
And
think about that?
it was a very unusual time when my fiance passed away when I was 26, because all of my friends were getting married. So it was really difficult for people to know what to say. So just what you talked about, so much of me receiving the support that I needed was letting people know specifically what I needed. And then that helped me have my needs met. But they weren't mind readers. And it was also just so painful because it was so opposite of what my peers were experiencing. And 6 weeks after my fiance died, my father suddenly died from a heart attack. So it wasn't just me grieving, it was my mother. And my mother and I were two young widows living together. I was 26 and she was 52. And it was really an unusual circumstance, but it brought us even closer. But also, my friends weren't losing their parents at that time either. So it was a really difficult. So I had empathy for my friends for how difficult it was to be around me and know what to say. So I felt, just because the person that I am, I wanted to ease their discomfort, and it helped me in the long run so that they knew exactly what I needed from them.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I was preparing for our talk today, and I was just kind of refreshing on the four agreements, one of the things that I think the author wants us to know is that we're not our stories. We're not the wounds that we've experienced. We're not our grief. And so I like to talk about emotions are amazing. They're really part of what makes life delicious, but they can become who we are. We can kind of, instead of inviting them into tea and experiencing them and letting them move through and see you later, sometimes they take over and they've moved in and they've unpacked their bags, and our identity is kind of lost in the tumultuous emotions. So I loved the idea that we're not our stories, we're not our wounds, we're not our assumptions. Anything you wanted to add to that?
Yes, and I believe as a therapist that is one of the reasons why in all of my 30 years of being a therapist that I have noticed that people are afraid to experience their painful emotions out of the fear of getting stuck there. So it's so important to have tools that help you move forward, and gratitude is one of them. So I always say, I love the words by Edith Eger. We cannot heal what we don't feel. She's the author of the book and The Choice, a psychologist who survived the Holocaust. And she speaks so eloquently in talking about embracing our emotional pain. And so we need to feel it, but we don't want to get stuck there. So it's important to have those tools. And I look at as a framework that I've come up with. I call it the positive mindset grid. That truly, in order to have and maintain a long-term positive mindset, we really need to address 4 quadrants. And one is positive thinking. We need to promote that. The other is negative thinking. We need to deal with our negative thoughts. Another quadrant is positive emotions that we need to know what works for us, whether it's listening to music, going for a walk. And then the last quadrant that so many people avoid is dealing with our painful emotions. Because we truly, just like you're saying, we need to embrace everything in order to live a full, delicious life.
Yeah, I feel like we, again, set ourselves up for disappointment when we believe there should be a time in life that we have arrived and we don't go through those ups and downs. And that to me is denying part of the deliciousness of life. Like, I love to the extent that I have capacity, but I appreciate that love when I have felt hurt, when I felt denied the love I thought I deserved. And so it's that contrast that increases appreciation and gratitude. But awareness is the first act of freedom. And so one of those quadrants that you were talking about is like just being aware that I have this negative self-talk, these negative beliefs, being aware that I have these negative emotions instead of wanting to deny them, really letting ourselves be real. Like that is the best way to move through anything, is to not deny.
Absolutely. And I think that I've seen so many high achieving women denying for many different reasons, being busy doing all the things, whether it's work related, caring for families, children, older parents, all of it, and not having the time to even pay attention to what they're going through. The other thing that often happens is just generational methods of dealing with thoughts and feelings and the way that we are modeled. And many well-meaning parents model that the method is to ignore and deny. It's well intended, but it doesn't lead to long-term well-being.
Right, right. So what would you suggest are better words? I have twin 3-year-old grandbabies, and these girls are learning about their emotions. And when they don't get their way, they scream. And so you don't want to deny their expression. And yet you also, so I've been trying to say, you're feeling angry right now. Let's just like talk about what it is and that it's okay. But how to revert or redirect that into something that actually does get their way, that does make them happier, because the screaming doesn't really do that. I'm sure you have a much more eloquent way of saying that. What kind of tools do you help people with?
Well, one is exactly what you just described, labeling the emotion. I call it an emotional check-in. Just same thing with getting what we often don't recognize our thoughts. Sometimes we're not even paying attention to how we feel. And we can't deal with our feelings when we're not in touch with them at all. So a simple check-in, an emotional check-in, asking myself, how am I feeling in this moment? And sometimes when life gets so busy and you can't address it during the day, I remember during my grief when I returned to work, I was a preschool teacher for children ages 3 to 6 who were actually kicked out of regular preschool due to their behavior. They had these children had witnessed so much violence in their lives that they were just repeating the violence that they saw, and they couldn't be maintained in a regular preschool. So it was a hospital-based preschool, and it was more like the therapy. But I needed to be on. I could not be grieving while caring for these children, or I would have been physically hurt. So I did my emotional check-in at the end of the day, and I would just ask myself, was there anything that happened and that was brought to feel, but in that moment I couldn't feel, just so I didn't go to bed without addressing whatever emotions needed my attention.
Mm.
So, and labeling. I love the work of Mark Brackett. He has a book, Permission to Feel, which is so helpful with a framework for for a process that we can go through in terms of emotional intelligence. And he calls it the ruler method. And the L in ruler is for labeling. And then the E is for expressing, and then the last R is for regulating, because we also don't just want to be expressing all over the place. We need to regulate. So I really love that framework, and it works with a 3-year-old and also with people in midlife as well who really have never had a framework for dealing with emotions.
Well, you just gave me a light bulb moment, and that is that if I'm in a situation where I really can't, because of like children, express what I really want, that it's never too late, that I can unpack that later. I can journal about it. I can bring to mind what was it I wish I could have done with that emotion so that it's not just shoved and stuffed, which we all know what that does to our health and body and psyche. And I was also thinking about, you had said something earlier about, it changes your mind, which changes the way you see the world, which inevitably does change the world. And that kind of reminds me of what fascinates me about the Four Agreements. It's deeply personal, but it's also profoundly collective because our words and assumptions and our beliefs, they don't live in isolation. They always have a ripple effect. And you just expressed that in that example where those children had seen violence and only knew how to behave violently. Everything we hold as an assumption, or the words that we choose to honor and resonate with, those are all decisions. Beliefs are what we've thought over and over enough until it became our truth, maybe not ultimate truth, likely not ultimate truth. So we change our minds about it, but we do have to take responsibility that there is a ripple effect.
Absolutely. And it can go in two different directions. And what I love about gratitude, it has a ripple effect. And when you're modeling and saying out loud what you're grateful for, the people around you pick up on that and start to see that they can appreciate those things as well. In fact, a formal exercise that I teach is called a team gratitude, where it's consciously picking a partner and sharing either daily or for any length of time that you like what each of you are grateful for. And it's a way to be accountable with the practice of gratitude, but it also opens up our eyes to hear what somebody else might be grateful for.
Oh my gosh, I have a friend and we meet every single week and we do what she calls awe exercises, appreciations, wins, and empowering questions. And you're right, there is something exponential when you have somebody holding what you're thinking with you. It's not just me in isolation, it's me and somebody else. And I kind of think that's biblical. Wherever two or more are gathered, there's this exponential energy. So we come together and we talk about what we appreciate, we celebrate wins together. And then the empowering questions part is forward thinking. Why was it so easy for this to happen? And you're projecting something that hasn't happened yet, but you're framing it as if it already did. So I really believe that imagination either reinforces or dissolves old agreements. Like we can bring it to one another and say what we'd like to see happen instead. So I want to ask something, but I remember writing a song, and the song was about seeing a more peaceful planet. And I sang it for somebody, and she almost was in a patronizing way say, "Oh, honey, don't you think if we were meant to have peace on earth, we would have figured it out by now?" And I remember how sad that made me feel because she didn't even think peace was possible. Why would you want to get out of bed in the morning if you don't think that things can get better, if you can't hold a space for that? And one of the lyrics of the song is, if you can see it in your mind, you can see it with your eyes. That's where everything starts. So coming together collectively and using imagination, like that to me is so powerful. So what other tools do you use that kind of help people get into that imagination space? Like gratitude is something that's happened, but also you can feel grateful in advance, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial. Just like you said, it's hard to move forward if you don't believe that something is possible. So, one of the tools that I use is visualization and even getting just very specific and making lists. And I love to share one that helped me personally when I was ready to start dating again. And I thought, well, now's my chance. I had true love. I knew what it felt like. I was not going to settle for anything less. And when I started dating again after my fiance died, I made a list of what I would love in a future partner. And I sat down on my childhood bedroom with a pink carpet. I had incense burning and a candle burning, and I just contemplated this list. And it's just crazy how my husband now is everything on that list and more. So, for example, I wrote that he needed to love children. Well, he is a sixth grade science teacher and is with 150 children every day. He needs to love skiing. He not only loves skiing, he has been our children's head coach race team for 16 years. So things like that. It was just amazing, but it was through the power of the mind. So if someone didn't fit one of the criteria that I had, a friend didn't introduce me or just, didn't even, not even in my radar. And the same thing happened to me when I had a crisis in my private practice. For 15 years, I was a forensic psychologist. I practiced just forensic psychology, was 100% of my income doing evaluations for families in crisis. Children had been removed from the home, and my job was to make recommendations to the court for what they needed to do for stabilization and reunification. And after 4,000 of those different stories of child abuse and neglect, I just could not do the work anymore. I woke up with a sense of dread, and I just could not do the work. And I did a great exercise that I read in a book by Jack Canfield, The Success Principles, and I made a list of what brought me joy. At the top of my list was speaking about gratitude. I made this list in 2015, and now it's become my life's work. I had to say no to what no longer served me, but still those limiting beliefs crept in. Who wants to hear about gratitude, and then who would even pay for it? Well, it turns out a lot of people want to hear about it and pay for it. And then number 2 on my list was making bracelets, and I now have a mental health bracelet company. And number 3 on my list was bringing women out in nature, and I have a separate company that I bring women out in nature and teach them about nature, awe, and the power of gratitude. And it just started with this list and visualizing the kind of future that I wanted to have. So I love that you bring up the power of imagination, because that's where our dreams are, and when we believe that they're possible.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, it seems like we do a lot in our society to kind of dumb down imagination. We say, get your head out of the clouds, stop daydreaming, think about reality. That's not reality. And I feel like that has been so damaging. Einstein said, imagination is everything. It is the preview of life's coming attractions. But if we're not intentionally using imagination, then we're really just missing out on the opportunity to create the kind of life that we want. So good for you for teaching visualization and living it. I feel like one of the things that people might be wondering about, because we set ourselves up for disappointment if we have these expectations, and yet we're saying get super clear about what you want and visualize and hold on to that. So I think there is like some level of disbelief. How can both be true? But I totally believe both are true. You have to get clear on what you want. Otherwise, you're just going to get more of what is. Like, I believe that our thoughts are like the building blocks that we give to the universe to create our future. And if we're just looking at what is, the universe is like, okay, I'll give you more of what is. If we don't spend time in imagination of what we would love, of what would peace look like, of what would this Christmas holiday be like if it could be everything it has the potential to be in a beautiful, fun, delicious way, then we're just going to get more of those things that don't serve us. The danger, though, is then becoming attached to it needing to look a specific way. So I always say to my clients when I'm talking about visualization, get super clear, but then release the outcome. Because God and the universe or whatever is working in realms unseen knows that what you really want is the way that would make you feel. And the particulars of getting there, you don't want to tie the hands of the universe by saying it has to look this way. Like, that's not going to help it happen. So get super clear, but then let go. So how do you help people with that kind of weighing of the expectation and the visualization?
By connecting to the present moment and experiencing joy along the way, particularly for things that take a long time. I call it the three P's: connecting to the present, to the pleasure of what you're doing, and the purpose of why you're doing it in the first place. And then that kind of helps to release the timeline so that because you're connecting to those other things that are bringing meaning and joy into it. And is so helpful for long-term projects when you're feeling impatient for it not getting there in the timeline that you would like. And then, just as you mentioned, just trust that everything unfolds in the time that it's meant to.
I
Trust
love
is
it.
so important.
Trust is so important. The quote in my email signature is by Margaret Mead, and it says something like, "Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world." In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. I know I missed some of that, but it really is talking about the idea of coming together and this group and the power of collective, because my imagination has a certain frequency. Thoughts have a certain vibration. When you move from thought soup to the spoken word, it elevates, increases, focuses that energy. The written word is even more powerful, but coming together and airing out what you believe and what you want to see, like that to me is such a powerful and largely untapped use of community, coming together for like a true visualizing what we want to see together. So I'm super excited about just like interviews like this, where we're talking about what this means and what we want to see differently. So, what do you think happens when a group agrees to stop taking things personally, for example?
That is life-changing. It changes family dynamics, it changes friendships. Really, everything improves when people start to notice the assumptions that they're making and then not acting on those assumptions and having other possibilities of what might be going on so that they can behave in ways that sometimes can salvage a friendship and be even better. It's really powerful.
Yeah, yeah. So, have you noticed that any particular one of the four agreements is more difficult than others for the people that you're working with to kind of live into?
It's hard to say. I truly, in my experience, have seen both making assumptions and taking things personally cause so much misery. But I believe that it's harder for people to, especially when they're being insulted or when they feel that something was done to them. It's hard. That I really believe that people struggle with the idea that it's not about them, or possibly seeing that even though something might be painful in the moment, that ultimately it is for them.
Yeah.
That can be so hard when you're in the midst of emotional pain and something isn't going your way. But yeah, it is a really tough one, which is why I so often
Yeah.
recommend that people read and reread that chapter. And it's not a one and done deal. It's something that needs to be practiced every day. There's opportunities for having our feelings hurt every single day. And
No
and when
doubt.
we are aware of that and tap into why we're feeling a certain way, and when we can connect it to maybe an assumption that we're making and making that assumption personally, then we can work on releasing it.
Yeah. I mean, we get hurt in big ways and small ways. And sometimes we'll brush the small ways under the carpet, but and really only think that it's the big ways that are doing damage. But it's an accumulation of all the hurt. If unaddressed, it can be debilitating. And so I mean, one of the things that I love about the use of imagination is kind of a reframing for people, especially when something feels like wrong. Like if you feel like all of society would agree that what happened to me was wrong. Like you can't make me change my mind about it because it happened and it was real and it was wrong. And still, there is room for being able to say, no one has the right to tell you not to feel the way you feel. Like, look at the evidence. You have the right to feel that way. My only question is, how long do you want to feel that way? Because that's a choice. And if you don't like the way you feel, only you can change your mind about it. And with help, coming to a community, being with people who can hold a different space with you for things to unfold differently. It lightens the load when you come together in community, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, which is part of why I love bringing women together, whether it's a walk. I've been running a women's weekly walk for 10 years, just what we walk weekly on Wednesdays. I love holding healing circles, bringing women together, and really we sit on the floor in a circle and talk about our goals and our visualization and the power of imagination and gratitude and all of that. Yeah, so there's it's wonderful when you do it as an individual, but when you are in the group of like-minded people, it just becomes magnified exponentially.
So you do retreats as well. I remember doing forest bathing experience. I was like, forest bathing, what is that? But now it is, pretty well known in wellness circles just to be in nature in that way. So describe some of the things that you do on your retreats and why your group coaching is another example of the power of the collective.
Sure. So, well, I have always been drawn to nature. As a child, about every free minute that I had was spent in nature. And it just became a part of my life. And then I became interested in the science behind it, the science behind awe and forests and water and trees and what it does for us. I love the science behind it. And then I teach women simple things that they can remember so that when they have the opportunity to go for a walk or do something else that might be mindless, they choose the walk. And when they know the science behind it and how powerful it is, and how we can utilize trees and being around water and the power of awe, so that when we know that when we experience awe in nature, it helps to diminish negative thinking, which is why people feel so good when they're out in nature. It's one of the reasons, because we can't hold an anxiety thought and be experiencing awe at the same time. And then when we also spend time with others in nature, the studies show that we feel closer to those people. So one study in particular that resonates with me is a mother and daughter spent time in nature, and they also spent time shopping, and they reported more closeness when they spent time out in nature. So it's a wonderful way for your own mental health and to feel connected to the people that you are with. So I help, when I'm bringing women out in nature, I help them to understand why being around water and looking at water feels so good and what it does to our brains, what trees do to our brains, whether they have leaves or not, and seeking out awe. So if you do go for a walk, be really intentional about it. Open your eyes and take a look at everything around you to really immerse yourself and embrace the power of nature. So that's part of my retreats, my weekend retreats. And I also, when I do day treats, we have a much shorter one to get out in nature.
That is so powerful. I mean, and gratitude can be practiced in ways that you just don't think of often. Like I know I get into the shower and I thank the water. That might sound silly, but like I get to take a shower. I remember being a young mom with two boys and a husband who all three of them were very athletic. And so they had like 5 outfits a day when they were practicing this or getting muddy doing that. And I felt like my whole life was laundry. And I remember feeling like really dissatisfied and frustrated and even a little resentful. And I didn't want to feel that way. And so I remember asking myself, how can I shift this to gratitude? And what came to me is I have a washer and dryer. I don't have to lug these down to a river and beat them on the rocks. Like I find little things to be grateful for. And I'll never forget my dad, who was experiencing some pain. He had gout in one of his feet and it was so intensely painful. And I asked him what he did. And he said, I focus on the foot that doesn't hurt. I put my attention on the parts of my body that feel great. And just removing my attention from the thing that was hurting shifts everything. So gratitude can play out in little unexpected ways that have an amazing impact. Are there any other practices you'd like to share?
Yes, well, and also along the lines of the laundry, I look at it in a different way, that I appreciate that I have people that I love and I get to do their laundry. And it's even more powerful because I know what it's like to have somebody's laundry left in a laundry basket and that person died. And so it becomes even just more powerful. I also with water, I help people to connect to the power of water. What changed my life was reading the book Blue Mind by Wallace J. Nichols, or J. Wallace Nichols. Really, the including from the shower and when we're washing our hands, and how every opportunity that we have to connect with water and be grateful for that water and truly know how it's having a relaxing impact on our nervous system is really powerful. And we take showers and wash our hands all the time, so often mindlessly. But when we can connect to the feeling and the sensation and appreciate that we get to choose the temperature, just looking at things that are so often taken for granted are opportunities for experiencing gratitude.
Just the power of presence, the intention of looking for opportunities to be more grateful. But imagine if we could be that present with everything, because when we're not present, it just means that we're in our own minds, thinking our own thoughts, but really feeling the water on your hands and choosing the temperature and adjusting the temperature, just like you said, that presence to that very minute moment shifts everything. I absolutely love that you shared that. Thank you.
And
Yeah.
that's a very simple one. One that takes a little bit more time that is really powerful is writing gratitude letters. When we can sit down for a few minutes and handwrite a gratitude letter for someone that we appreciate. And there's so much research behind this as well. And of course, it benefits the recipient, but it really helps the person who's doing the writing, because it just might be the 5 or 10 minutes of your day where a negative thought did not creep in, because you are hyper focused on positivity as you are writing that gratitude letter. So if you're having a little bit of a down day, it's one of the easiest, simplest ways to elevate your own mood, and somebody else gets to benefit in the process.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there are people on the planet who right now believe that this is some of the darkest, scariest times that we've experienced. And yet there is the other swing of the pendulum where people are so excited because, there are people who are more in touch with the power of presence, with the power of gratitude. And it really is just, what are you choosing to look at? So when you think about if a group of humans practiced gratitude together, what do you think could shift faster?
It would change everything, because perspective is everything. So when we see the negative and we're focused on that, we're just going to see more of it. So when we, even in the slightest way, start to look for things that we are grateful for, it's like telling our brain what's important to us, and we start to see more of it. And then, because of this beautiful part of our brain, the reticular activating system that works as a filter behind the scenes, we don't even know that it's working. It helps us to see more of what we are looking for. So when we are intentional about gratitude, our brains will help us to find more things to be grateful for. And then that affects our mood. And then we carry that mood into our interactions with other people. We tend to be kinder, relationships improve, our self-esteem improves. And it has a ripple effect. And it can simply start with an intentional gratitude practice.
I love that. And adding to that a little question of, how do I want to feel? How do I want to feel? Instead of just reacting and noticing what I do feel, how do I want to feel? That invites something that is so powerful. So gratitude for what is, visualization and gratitude for what could be, and then really being present with what it is you want out of every interaction. And so I love to kind of be intentional about how I would like this next part of my life to unfold, whether it's like an interview with you. We did a little bit of calm breathing right before we started, and intended that what we want from this conversation is for it to reach somebody and have a positive effect. And we can do that whenever we're walking into a meeting or like gathering with people for the holidays, is how do I want to feel and how can I contribute to the well-being of others?
Yes, and that is a real thing. Emotional contagion is very real, that we pick up on the emotions of the people that we spend time with. And when we are intentional about keeping it positive and sharing that joy with other people, they benefit as well, whether it's a meeting, an interaction with a friend, it could any situation, including complete strangers at the grocery store.
Oh my gosh. It reminds me of a song my sister wrote. I am a radiating center of light. Through me, only God's light will shine. And then it's love and then peace. And when you're really thinking about it, my energy can be felt. And so how I'm choosing to be isn't just for me, isn't just for my benefit. It is going to have a ripple effect. Imagine what it would be like if we all took responsibility for the energy that we contributed every time we go into any experience or interaction. I want to be more responsible for what I'm contributing because it's not passive, it is impactful.
Yes. And gratitude can be a method of doing that as well with complete strangers. So, for example, if you are on a checkout line at a grocery store, a genuine compliment, it just might be the nicest thing that somebody heard all day. And there's so much power in connecting with strangers. We often discount how powerful they can be, the impact that we can have on others, and the impact they have on us. So I always say there's no such thing as small talk. It's all talk. All talk matters. And I love a very recent research piece came out that our interactions with complete strangers on a daily basis have just as much value for our well-being as our inner circle. But our brains often tell us, oh, it doesn't matter to talk to strangers. Well, it does matter. And when we're also intentional about keeping it positive, it helps to that ripple effect that it truly can change our communities and the world. And that's exactly what we need right now.
Yeah, don't talk to strangers. Let's undo that. Talk to strangers. Talk to strangers every single day. I actually had an experience years ago when I was in a very busy store and there was a screaming toddler and her mother was so affected by it, impacted by it. I don't know if she was embarrassed or just angry at the child's behavior, but she was gripping that child a little too hard and angry. And then we ended up being in the restroom at the same time, and everything in me wanted to give her a hug. And everything that society has told me was like, leave it alone, don't say anything. And I just said, I would like to give you a hug. And I did. And she broke down and cried, and she just felt seen. And we have the opportunity to do that if we just like forget that part that was trained into us and listen to our internal guidance. Like it was screaming at me, she needs a hug. So I wish we would do more to honor that small voice that is telling us what to do every step of the way if we just got out of our own way and listened.
Yes, getting out of our own way is so important. And sometimes that is just a simple thought that can prevent a wonderful behavior. Complimenting a stranger, just like you did a hug. So often our brains will tell us, oh, that they don't want to be bothered, or that feels too awkward, or whatever it may be, and then we don't do it. But when we do, when we move out of our comfort zone and do those things, it has an amazing impact on how we feel, and it can be just the nicest thing that happened to that person all day.
And it can start small, just smiling at the gas station attendant who takes your money. That's all it really needs to be. How was your day? A little bit, taking a little bit further. It doesn't have to be the bold hug to somebody who's obviously having a meltdown, but that's nice too, because it's needed. Human touch is so, so needed. So I just like to ask my guests if you have any questions, if there's anything coming to mind that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about. I will want to invite people to know how to get in touch with you, so we'll handle that just a little bit. Is there any question that you have coming to mind?
In your experience, what has been the biggest reframe or thought change in the clients that you work with?
I would say there has been something that has been steadily growing over the last several years, and it's a self-trust. And that self-trust leads to deeper self-love. And feeling that for myself has helped me help others feel it for themselves. So there's been a growing sense of intuition. There's been a growing sense of kind of intuiting what a client might need and just holding space for that to unfold. So I would say the biggest thing that has shifted for me has been this increase in self-love and helping people love themselves more as well.
So important.
Thank you for asking that. Thank you for asking that. So I always want to let listeners know about the things that you are doing to help people. And so if somebody wants to learn more about you, Dr. Peggy DeLong, how will they do that?
They can learn about me by checking out my website, drpeggydelong.com. And if people would like to stay connected, I have a free resource on that website. The whole link is drpeggydelong.com/The Grateful Day, or there's a resource tab on my website that people can click on. And that, if you sign up for that, One day, for 5 days, I will deliver one email providing you with a simple gratitude practice, and all five I call the Grateful Day. And these five simple exercises don't need to take more than 5 minutes a day, yet they are truly transformational. And they're simple ways to just begin a gratitude practice. So that's one way that people can get in touch with me and benefit, improve their lives through the power of gratitude.
Well, if what we talked about today resonates with any of our listeners, it's been about being impeccable with your word. It's about not taking anything personally. It's about really deep diving into gratitude. And so they're not going to want to miss that resource. So it's the Grateful Day 5 Day Challenge. And again, that's drpeggydalong.com/, the Grateful Day. What a great challenge to offer people, and a great tool there where people can really test out what gratitude can do for them. Thank you for that gift. That's awesome.
My
And tell us
pleasure.
a teeny bit about your midlife coaching program.
Sure, it's called Midlife Awakening Sisterhood, and it is using my proprietary method for mental health and well-being called the Prioritize Peace Method, where the PEACE stands for one area of our lives that deserves our attention every day. P for positivity, E, exercise, moving our body, A, achievement, and for the midlife women, that's often redefining what achievement really means. C for connection, and then the last E for empathy, starting with self-love, looking at empathy in a different way, because so often we view empathy as giving to others, but when we don't take care of ourselves first, just as you were talking about before, that self-love is so important. It puts us in a better position to be able to give to others in a way that feels good continuously and doesn't lead to burnout. So a lot of what I talk about is redefining, reframing for what these things look like for the high achieving midlife woman. And that's in a 3-month program that people can join at any time.
I love that. Thank you for doing that. That to me is my vision as well, is how do we hold space with one another for the way we want to see things unfold. So thank you for this wonderful, deep, meaningful conversation, Dr. Peggy. I really appreciate you.
My pleasure, Kristen. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye now. That's it for today's episode of the Evolve Now Show. If something in this conversation landed for you, a moment, an insight, a feeling, I'd love for you to pause for just a second and let me know. Rating the show, leaving a review, or sharing it with someone you love is one of the most powerful ways you can help this work reach the people who need it. You can also find me at KristenHartnagel.com, where I share resources, reflections, and ways to connect more deeply. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being open, and for taking an active part in the expansion of consciousness. That's honoring the evolution happening within you. Until next time, remember, holy shift, everything's a gift when you're willing to see it that way. And I'll meet you right here next time on Evolve Now.